Hello everyone and Assalamu alaikum. This is Introduction to Psychology Part 2 by Dear Knowledge. Okay, so we have started the chapter 3, which is about learning, and here you can see in front of the screen a chapter overview. These are all those topics which we will be covering in the chapter of learning, and we have covered lots of topic in the chapter of learning. Let me share a quick recap with you all on what we have covered so far. So we started with the definition of learning, in which we have learned a lot about the definition of learning, starting with a case study, and we have also discussed every single mm, line, every single word that was used in the definition of learning. So, after the definition of learning, we have started types of learning, in which we have covered the classical conditioning. And classical conditioning itself was a very detailed topic. So, I've divided the classical conditioning into different parts. So, if you have missed any of the previous lecture, I've given all the links in the description section. And after the classical conditioning, we have started the operant conditioning, and we have also covered lots of topics in the operant conditioning. So if you have missed any of the previous lecture, you can visit the playlist section, where I have compiled all the previous lectures in a sequence, in a proper sequence, according to the chapter, according to the lesson, for your ease. So you can visit the playlist section of our YouTube channel, and you can also visit the description section, where I have provided the link of the previous lectures, the playlist, and the previous lecture we have covered. So in this video, this is going to be lesson 2, which is again an operant conditioning, which comes under the types of learning. And in the operant conditioning, this is going to be part 2E, which is about the concept of reinforcement. So in the concept of reinforcement, the last lecture was about the primary and secondary reinforcement, in which you will learn, or you have learned, about what is the primary and secondary reinforcement. So if you have missed that lecture, you haven't watched it, you can ask me in the comment section. I will provide the link, or you can visit the videos section of this YouTube channel, where you can watch the previous lecture, and you can also visit the description section of this video and click on the link, and you can watch the primary and secondary reinforcement video. So in this video, we will learn about the positive and the negative reinforcement. What is positive reinforcement and what is negative reinforcement? So let's start with our today's lecture about positive reinforcement and negative reinforcement. So yet you have learned a lot about what is reinforcement, what is primary reinforcement, what is negative reinforcement, and which one is more important, or which one is more dominant, which one is learned, and etc. and etc. So here you will learn that reinforcers can also differ in the way they are used. Most people have no trouble at all understanding that following a response with some kind of pleasurable consequence, like a reward, will lead to an increase in the likelihood of that response being repeated. But many people have trouble understanding that the opposite is also true. Following a response with the removal or escape from something unpleasant would also increase the likelihood of that response being repeated. So, reinforcement does not always mean reward. No, there are really only two kinds of things that people ever experience as a consequences in the real world. So things they like food, money, candy, praise, and so on, and things they don't like spanking, being yelled at, and experiencing any kind of pain, to name a few. No, there are also only two possibilities for experiencing these two kinds of consequences. Either people experience them directly, such as getting money for working, or getting yelled at for misbehaving, or they don't experience them, such as losing an allowance for misbehaving or avoiding a scolding by lying about a behavior. So, getting money for working is an example of positive reinforcement. The reinforcement of a response by addition or experiencing of a pleasurable consequence, such as a reward or pat on the back. Now, that one everyone understands, but avoiding a scolding by lying about one's behavior is an example of negative reinforcement. So, the definition of the positive reinforcement is the reinforcement of a response by the addition or experiencing of a pleasurable consequence or pleasurable stimulus. So, the reinforcement of a response by the addition or experiencing of a pleasurable stimulus. Whereas the definition of the negative reinforcement is the reinforcement of a response by the removal, escape from, or avoidance of an unpleasant stimulus. Because the behavior, such as lying, results in avoiding an unpleasant stimulus, which is the scolding. So, the likelihood that the person will have that way again, lie in the future, is increased. So, just as a positive reinforcement will increase a behavior's likelihood. Now, the problem here is people get confused because negative sounds like it ought to be something bad, like a kind of punishment. But punishment always decreases the likelihood of a behavior happening again. Punishment weakens responses, whereas reinforcement, no matter whether it is positive or negative, it strengthens responses. So, is having a toy removed an example of a negative reinforcement? Or what's the difference between negative reinforcement and negative reinforcement and punishment? So that is the heart of the confusion. Negative reinforcement occurs when a response is followed by the removal or an unpleasant stimulus. So, if something unpleasant has just gone away as a consequence of that response, wouldn't that response tend to happen again and again? So, if the response increases, the consequence has to be a kind of a reinforcement. So, the problem is that the name sounds like it should be some kind of punishment because the word negative, and that's exactly the problem that many people experience when they are trying to understand negative reinforcement. So, they get negative reinforcement mixed up with a kind of punishment in which a pleasant thing is removed, like having your driver's license taken away because you caused a lot of uh, bad accidents, or because you caused a bad accident. So because something is removed or taken away, in both cases people think that they will both have the effect of punishment or weakening a response. So the difference between them lies in what is taken away. So in the case of negative reinforcement, it is the unpleasant thing, and in the case of particular form of punishment, it is pleasant or desirable thing. Like you can see in the table in front of you on the screen, there are some points that I have mentioned here, the main points that can differentiate between the negative reinforcement and the positive reinforcement. Now you can see right here, punishment always decreases the likelihood of a behavior happening again. So the main purpose of a punishment is to weaken a response. So punishment weakens response. Whereas in the negative reinforcement, no matter is it positive or negative, but it strengthens response. So the punishment, it weakens response, but the negative reinforcement, it strengthens response. Another difference between the negative reinforcement and the punishment is that a, in the punishment, a pleasant or desirable thing is removed to weaken response. So, again, told you that the difference between them lies in what is taken away. So, in punishment, a pleasant stimulus or desirable thing is removed. Whereas in the negative stimulus, negative reinforcement is followed by the removal of an unpleasant stimulus. So, in the negative reinforcement, an unpleasant stimulus, there is an unpleasant stimulus. So, negative reinforcement is followed by the removal of an unpleasant stimulus. Let me share a few examples with you so it will be easy for you to understand the difference much more clearly. So, the example in the punishment would be being grounded. So being grounded means losing your freedom, and losing your freedom is like the removal of that pleasant stimulus, the removal of that desirable thing because of disobedience. So next time you will not disobey because you don't want to lose that desirable thing. So that disobedience response will be weakened. So being grounded Losing your freedoms because of your disobedience is the punishment. Whereas in the negative reinforcement, it can be like obeying a parent before the parent reaches the count of three to avoid getting a scolding. So you're trying to avoid the unpleasant stimulus, you're trying to remove the unpleasant stimulus, you're trying to escape from that unpleasant stimulus. So that's why it is called negative reinforcement. Another example in the punishment would be losing a driver's license because you broke many traffic rules or traffic signals. So you have lost that driver's license. Losing that pleasurable thing, that driver's license desirable thing for you. So you have lost it because you broke the traffic signals. So that is the punishment. And the negative reinforcement, it can be stopping at red light to avoid losing driver's license or avoid getting fined. So this is like you're trying to avoid that unpleasant stimulus. You're trying to avoid that unlikable, unpleasant thing that is losing your driver's license or avoiding or getting fined. So this is the main difference between the punishment and the negative reinforcement. So now tell me, is having a toy removed an example of negative reinforcement? Is it? Is having a toy removed an example of a negative reinforcement or punishment? Write your answers in the comment section and do let me know what do you think about it. So, distinguishing between positive reinforcement and negative reinforcement is a little easier. Now, try to figure out which of the following examples would be positive reinforcement and which would be negative reinforcement. I want you to figure this out and then I'm going to share my answers with you. Now, the first one here is Jack's father nags him to wash his car. Jack hates being nagged, so he washes the car so his father will stop nagging. Is it a negative reinforcement or a positive reinforcement? Now, if you pay attention, Jack is being negatively reinforced for washing his car because the nagging, which is the unpleasant stimulus, stops when he does so. So it is a negative reinforcement. Now let's come to another example. Kamran learns that talking in a funny voice get him lots of attention from his classmates. So now he talks that way often. Is it a positive reinforcement or a negative reinforcement? Now again, pay attention. Kamran is getting positive reinforcement in the form of his classmates' attention. So it is positive reinforcement. Now the third one is John is a server at a restaurant and always tries to smile and be pleasant because that lead to bigger tips. Is it a positive reinforcement or a negative reinforcement? Do let me know about the answers in the comment section and let me know that what you were thinking about these examples. Now, John's smiling and pleasantness are positively reinforced by the customer's tips. So it is a positive reinforcement. Now, the last one is Amna submits her assignment on the day it is due because papers get marked down a later grade for every day they're late. Now, Amna is avoiding an unpleasant stimulus. The markdown grade by turning in her assignment on time, which is an example of a negative reinforcement. So it is negative reinforcement. You can also share some of your examples with me in the comment section and let me know. I will read those examples and I will also share my views with you. So let me know about, share some few examples, one or two examples of a negative reinforcement or one or two examples of a positive reinforcement. You can also share some examples from your daily life, like did you ever experience a positive reinforcement or did you ever experience a negative reinforcement? Do let me know about these in the comment section. Okay, so this was all about today's video. If your concept is clear, you can like the video. If there was any point that was confusing, you can ask us in the comment section and we will be happy to help you out. Plus, if you're new to this channel, subscribe to our channel, click on the bell icon so you will never ever miss any notification. And you can also share the link of this channel, share the link of this video with your family members and friends because sharing is caring. And till then, Allah Hafiz.